All right, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for another Twitter Space. Today is August 17th, 2022, and this is episode 8 of the ledgerscale Internet of Value Focus Topic Forum. Now, ledgerscale Foundation was founded with two goals in mind. One, we want to provide educational services to not only our community, but to the entire digital asset community, and to help scale up the number of brains that understand how distributed ledger technology works. And two, we intend to one day run hardware to provide infrastructural support to the distributed ledger technology networks that we believe are ESG friendly and running a form of decentralized consensus. Now, we host these spaces Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, starting at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. And on Wednesday, we host a focus topic space from 5 to 6. And if I could just ask if everyone could give us a follow on Twitter and turn those notifications on so you know when we're going live, as well as if you could click that little bubble at the bottom right and retweet the space so that hopefully other people in the future can find this information valuable.
Yeah, and so basically, we're here to just engage the community. And please, if anybody has a question about the topic today, speak up. I already see some good people in here. If you're curious about something, I guarantee you someone else will be, or maybe someone who hears the recording. And if you do speak up, just please be cordial and welcome to the space. Today, we're going to discuss a topic which I'm afraid is probably going to go a little bit over my head. About the idea of creating a validator that's actually run as a DAO.
Yeah, and this is a topic that I want to give the credit where credit's due, right? Costa actually brought this up once in a conversation, and it stuck with me ever since he said it. And so we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I think this would be more like a focused topic, but brainstorming. And so if anybody has anything they want to bring up in the audience or any ideas that might add into this or how they think it would play out, please feel free to come up because this is a completely, like Thomas said, untouched subject that I don't know if really anybody's ever really talked about. But yeah, I just thank you, Kashta, also for the idea. I saw you unmute, so go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, no. Again, it was just one of our typical kind of brainstorming things, and it was something that I had thought about before, but not really in a DAO aspect, just to really kind of clarify kind of what my intentions were. I think the consensus mechanism for the XRP ledger is fine as is. Right? I don't have a problem with the consensus. It's trust building. It's everything that we've talked about before, right? But I think the ability to just form a second layer mechanism, that's separated upon from any kind of amendment process or, the core ledger process is just to form a, second layer that can capture the opinions of, the shared stakeholders in total, right? At least it be recorded, right? And it would almost be more similar to like, Wisties kind of adopt a node kind of program, right? So if there's a way that we can all kind of figure a way to maybe marry some of those ideas, yeah, I think that's what we're kind of here to see, to find out. But I think increasing the community participation was really my intent.
Yeah, and from a decentralization standpoint, right? It's like if you had to question how could you further decentralize the node structure past just the UNLs, right? I think this really would be, at least in my mind so far, the only answer. And you know, the implementation part, right, is like to me like the biggest question. And it's like I'd like to hear Rippleton's thoughts on this one from like a UNL standpoint, right? Because still the UNL has to be a single node, right? And a single node is operated by a single individual. How would that person or that entity feel about decentralizing their own UNL? And so giving the ability for not only their decision, but for other people to make a decision on their kind of input.
Yeah, so ripples on here. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's one of the things that has always confused me is the whole voting process. And we've talked about this in the past, and how can we decentralize it further? And not so much decentralize it further, it's how to incorporate the wishes of all the other validators that are actually on the network, whose votes, for the most part, aren't considered because they're not part of the supermajority UNL. And one of the ways I've thought about it is that, as you said, it's very difficult when you have a central point who has to run a validator. And so somebody has to feed the command in to actually vote in some form. So every individual validator is centralized in its own right, but they collectively as a group form a decentralized network. But one of the things I've often thought about is how could you bring in those other validators who don't have a vote? One of the things I've considered is basically putting an allocation of votes into the consensus process from those validators who aren't part of the UNL. So, for argument's sake, they might hold a weighting of 3 votes, for example, so that the validators, all the validators who aren't part of the supermajority, all their votes are tallied, and then they have an allocation of votes into the consensus process of, say, maybe 3 votes or 5 votes or whatever. It could be relative to what proportion of validators they are. So, yeah, that's one of the things. It's a difficult question, when you have a centralized point with validators, but running a DAO or some form of decentralized system to run a validator, possible, but you still need somebody to actually feed in the commands and a central point of failure, I suppose, if you could call it that.
Well, what do you think about this idea? I don't know if this makes any sense whatsoever, but think about, like, okay, you've got a agent operating a bridge between, say, XRP and another blockchain. Almost in a staking type of thinking, the people that have the biggest stake in that bridge operator's pool get to have like a vote for the UNL. Like maybe when they stake, they get issued a secondary sort of governance token, and then that governance token is used to vote for various UNL structures or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm making this stuff up. I've never really thought through this kind of thing.
So from my point of view, regarding anything that has value assigned to it, that gives you privilege, I think is a dangerous thing, because the minute you start having a cost factor, then it's very impressionable upon those who hold the most value, and that's not necessarily the best thing. Ripple have, they're obviously the biggest stakeholder value-wise in the XRPL, but they don't have any greater advantage over their vote than what I do. And there are people who run UNL nodes who don't have any skin in the game at all. So I think value, the more we can keep value out of it as part of the equation, the safer it's going to be.
Well, the only reason I said it that way was because, like let's say you're running a bridge or an agent or a federator or whatever you want to call it, market maker. I'm going to have to deposit some XRP or some issued asset with you in order for you to be comfortable reissuing it on the other chain. So you already have that sort of economic situation occurring. And so I was just thinking, well, if you could just use that economic situation and throw in a weighting thing, you're definitely right. Like a weighted average definitely favors the people with the most resources. I mean, there's no way around that.
You can actually look at XDC. There's actually a project called Biblion that actually sold NFTs that was worth 10,000, I believe, XDC per NFT, which the holders of those NFTs are then entitled to a node on the XDC network, which they'll be getting paid a certain amount of XDC per NFT that they hold, which is a pretty cool thing that they have done to bring people and able to actually gain passive income that way. But it's very different from running on the XRPL, as you know. I mean, you don't really need, well, to validate. You don't have to stake anything inside to be a validator.
Yeah, just real quick, Rippleton. Do you think that just another layer of just pure transparency adds enough benefit to go through some of the, I'll say, for lack of a better word, trouble that we're kind of discussing here, right? In that, could a current UNL member, right, just, and this is purely hypothetical, right? But could a current UNL just kind of make an agreement that he will kind of either wait or accept the will of an aggregate pool of another layer that's capturing the consensus of the wider community, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I believe with
do.
the next
I do,
coming features coming in would help out with being able to actually use hooks or something like of that nature to help with running with our subject we're talking about.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, a UNL valid is not considered
I think cutting out.
by who owns that validator. It's considered by the people who trust that validator. So if it becomes a DAO, then it's more than likely that the the lists or people who set up their UNLs are probably going to remove that from the UNLs because it's less likely to have some form of balanced accessibility to repairing, to maintaining, to keeping up it would have to build trust before it could be trusted as a DAO. So you couldn't just become a UNL, then change the way
No,
in which you operate.
No, just to clarify, hold on just one second, Karma. Just to clarify, though, what I'm saying is, and I'm purely hypothetical, but for instance, using you as an example, you're currently a UNL member who is allowed to vote based all on his own opinions and impressions of what you view the circumstances to be, right? What I'm saying is, could you make a commitment? And I'm using you just as an example, no pressure, but just to kind of brainstorm it. Could you then say that I'm making a commitment that I'm going to consider, right, this not other DAO or anything that's automated or anything that needs maintaining, but just a voting mechanism that's getting the input from all the people who are holders, and they say, well, this is what we feel, and then Ripple says, well, based on these other 5 million people that have already said that's their direction, I'm going to go with the will of the people, maybe just over the will of what my own opinion would be.
Yeah, so that's a very difficult situation to be in, and for the most part, I regard myself as a community validator in that I look at the community for guidance with regard to what the amendment is, and I discuss openly with the community, as I have done with XLS 20. And that's why my vote was cast to be upgraded and fixes to be put in. But what I say, and it still comes down to, doesn't matter what I think is a validator, I know, because it's everybody else's validators who are choosing me to be representative, and that's the issue. So even though I may have control of what and how I vote, that may not be the choices of all the other UNL validators who have me on their list. So they may turn around and say, well, we no longer can trust him because he's taking a much wider audience who can be swayed. Because you know what votes are like. Votes can be basically created or swayed into whichever way they want.
Manipulated.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and that's the problem, is that, and that's why people need to understand it's not a validator who's got a UNL status or a supermajority status is not because of who they are. It's because of how everybody else who trusts them, who trusts that validator. And so my ability to maintain my position is not reliant on me, it's reliant on everybody else. So and that's the problem you've got.
I think
So I like this idea that you came up with though. So how, based on what nodes the UNL per se trust, those nodes would get some sort of voting token. Now I wonder, because there's still that central point of you could still say no even if they didn't and said yes, right? I wonder if there's any way that in the future we'll be able to incorporate Evernote in hooks, because you know how you said, like, really in the end of the day you still have to put that input data, that function, to either say yes or no, or really to say yes is the node because it is a default no. um, I wonder if there would be ever a way to use Evernote so that maybe you could agree as a UNL that you want to be more decentralized, and you distribute, as you said, that token to the other nodes that you trust, and then when they vote, um, the actual function is driven by maybe an Evernote contract. Do you think do you think that would be something that maybe is a possibility?
You know what this makes me think of? Like creating your own ecosystem. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like a sidechain kind of thing. Well, not really using a sidechain, but you create your own ecosystem where the one person or whoever is nominated to control whatever, however it goes. I know it's gonna need some fine tuning. This is just thinking off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. We create a mechanism to where whoever votes in the UNL runner. Oh, sorry, I gotta get back in tune with what I was thinking. Sorry, the whole lot going through my head right now. It's crazy.
no, I think the idea is like, okay, let's say with say karma coverage or ledger scale, we're running a node or a validator for the XRP ledger. In both cases, we could let, not us as the central operators, but the community that was contributing. And, in both cases, karma coverage, you'd have your sort of people, your users doing coverage and doing whatever it is risk they're trying to spread about. And then ledger scale, you could have the other people, their reasons. And then there's got to be some sort of mechanism where those folks who are actually the economic inputs, because there's a centralization around like who runs the server. But if there's a way to take like maybe you can run the server and the hardware, but you're not necessarily in charge of choosing the UNL. Like if you can somehow distribute that out to the user base, and especially if you consider something like a karma coverage, which would be like a side chain. So then the monetization mechanism, the revenue model is like basically being the connector between the main chain and the side chain. So you're going to have to be running a ledger or a node on the, but you could let the users of the folks like on the side chain, somehow or another, there's got to be some mechanism or method that you can somehow or another like let all those because they're going to all be using the same bridge, right? Like they benefit or detriment from the quality of that bridge. So let them decide who they trust.
Well, that's people have got that now. Every validator has the opportunity to determine who they trust. They just choose to use the list, the published list that are currently shipped with it as a default. But they're openly able to and encouraged to change it to suit themselves. But the thing is that when it boils down to it, in the vote, you've got 145 validators currently, right? And 35 are on the only because that's the number that is set on the published lists. I find it peculiar that we have 3 different published lists, but they all have the same validators on them, which is a bit odd. But that's another bridge to cross on another day. But the thing is, and this is the perception that I had, is that with 145 validators, there's 145 opinions. 35 are deemed to be the supermajority currently, and that's because people have, or other validators have chosen those 35 to be representative of their consensus mechanism in deciding consensus. And it just so happens that the vote process uses consensus mechanism as opposed to any other, like the fees, for example. But if you had, for the argument's sakes of bringing in amendments, the ability to use the supermajority, the UNL majority, to make the decision, along with a weighted amount of maybe 5%, maybe 8%, maybe 10% of the total number of validators. So even though I'm a UNL validator or supermajority validator, I still have a vote, and I still make that vote on behalf of me, because I could slip in and out of that supermajority at any time. So everybody's vote is considered, UNL vote is considered, and the whole group as a group is given a weighted amount of votes.
What we call plurality.
Sorry, what was that?
Plurality, right?
Yeah.
Not just the person that owns the most. There's a plurality mechanism.
Well, yeah. So what it does is it gives everybody in the network a voice, and the ability to say, well, yeah, I want my voice heard. But there are some ramifications with that. One of the things that would have to change is the current situation where the standard vote that comes out, well, a default vote of no, it comes with the amendment when it comes out, when it becomes amended to the XRPL. That would need to change to no vote. So a validator would actually expressly have to vote. They would have to vote yes or no to cast their vote, because currently there's a default vote of no that's cast on your behalf when you update Rippled. And I've been
Well,
in opposition to that.
you think it should be just abstain?
Well, yeah, they should. When you cast a vote, you actually cast a vote. You don't have one cast on your behalf, because it may not be your decision, and it may not be a decision that you are able to make right now for all sorts of reasons. But I've opposed this for quite a while. I've said there should be no vote cast, because a voting process is exactly that. Somebody actually has to make a vote. You don't walk into a polling booth and have your vote cast on your behalf, and you have to cross out the no vote to vote somebody else. There's no democratic process to a vote being pushed out as a no. And I can understand it from a safety point of view for the network, but from a casting point of view, somebody needs to say no. I don't want this to be enabled, and that will give you a much better measure of the network's consideration. A vote, and maybe it could be as simple as the supermajority, or all the votes of everybody are highlighted as to what the whole population of validators are voting on a current amendment, as opposed to just the supergroup, but the supergroup has the final decision. I don't know, maybe that's the way, but there needs to be some way of understanding what the whole validator network or node network is voting on a current amendment. In order to be,
I forget what it is, but there's some math in the complexity world where you can measure this. There's a term for this type of weighting where the nodes are connected with more nodes because of the trust, the UNL connection, and then you can map out a topology of it. That would be cool to see a topology of the UNL.
Well, yeah. And well, there is, to a certain degree, a topology of the UNL, but we don't have any way of measuring each individual validator's. Well, no, I won't say that. There is a way of measuring each individual validator's vote because it comes out in every flagged ledger. All we need is somebody to actually portray that, and it's something that I might actually have a chat with XRP Scan and.
Well, I would think you'd be able to see like let's say I went and looked at your validator, like each ledger, wouldn't I be able to see who you had on your
every 256th ledger, every flag ledger portrays it. So, and it is measurable. It's just that we don't measure. Well, we measure the UNL validators votes, but I'll have a chat to XRP Scan and see if we can formulate some way of pulling all validators' votes and just seeing which ones, and more importantly, the expressly have actually cast a vote, because that's something that occurs by way of a config file, or you send a command to Ripple. So I'll have a chat to him and see if there's some way of looking into that. And
Trust attestation. I think is that the one you was talking about. It's a trust attestation mechanism for sending layer nodes, Internet of Things.
Yeah, there's so each flag ledger determines your voting status, and that's how the data is pulled.
Flag ledger. What is that?
It just contains more data, basically.
Can I ask a dumb question? Let's do this.
There's no dumb question.
If on the XRPL, and you're a node, are you dealing with the voting structure for XRP itself? Or are you going to say like, well, we have going upon the XRPL. So like, is a node in itself only dealing with that one chain, or is it dealing with multi-chains?
Well, no.
Sorry, say that again.
So he asked if a vote on the XRP ledger could have anything to do with another chain, and I would say
no.
The aspect of when you're running a node, a validator node, or a UNL, right? When you get to make a decision, you're only making a decision for an amendment change, which is typically a code change on the layer one itself that you're stationed on. So,
well, no, you're actually voting on consensus as well.
It's consensus, yes. But when you're voting,
voting on amendments, just it follows the consensus process. So it's basically, that's what you're voting. You're voting consensus on the XRP ledger, and it just so happens that amendments are built into that. But when it comes to fees, it's not the consensus process.
Okay, another dumb one. I had a great thought, but then everything kind of kept going.
Let me add to that. The validators are not looking at the transactions. They're just looking at the cryptography. So they don't really care what the facts of the transaction are. They just process it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm more going at the organization of like how it's processed. But then, if you were to think, I'm not sure what that was. But I had a good point. Thought it was that the interesting thing this week is that okay, Ripple is very valuable as a company, but XRP is just XRP, and then the ledger is out there for anybody to use, and then it can get different tokens on it. And then, how would I put this?
Hey man, how's it going?
Good, man. Because somebody said the value isn't the point, and I would say value is always the point. Like, but if we're going to use say Algorand on the XRPL or say a different token, all right. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Hey, what happened there, man?
Yeah. Value is a very, very important point. But the thing is that there is no value attributable to a validator validating or a node operating on the XRP ledger. there is no value there's no value gained by doing that. And so if you incentivize anything, especially a voting process, by way of your net worth or a net worth, then it becomes a very undiplomatic way of determining a vote process. And then you get an unrestricted. You basically buy your votes.
Well, you want to avoid a 51-50, but like that's where I brought up the plurality idea, right? Everything has a pro and con, but if you were a super validator or you do what Ethereum just did and they're about to fork it and all the Ethereum nodes are all pissed off about it, you kind of want to avoid that scenario.
Well, this is also Rippleton was saying, and this is the problem with proof of stake from an economic point of view. It's the rich get richer and screw everybody else. Like once you compound that across time, that's just what's going to unfold.
Yeah,
which I feel like is kind of against the spirit of decentralization and peer-to-peer payment systems, and I don't think that like Lucy was sitting there trying to figure out a way to make the rich get richer. That's I'm pretty was not his goal.
Because currently the situation is that a Ripple validator, for argument's sake, has no more benefit, influence, or variance to what I do, to what Karma does, to what any other validator on the network does. They are all equal, and there's no money to influence them, gives them no more voting power, nothing. But the thing for me is, and getting back to the original question about DAOs and diversification of the UNL, the thing is what people need to do is start learning who their validators are, who they need to trust, and who they can trust, and from that build their own lists, and then offer those lists for others to use. Because currently we have 3 lists which are identical, which is so in essence we have one list.
This is kind of the point of the chat. Is I was thinking, how could somehow or another, how could you make like crowdsource so you run a node, a validator. Can you crowdsource the selection of the UNL so that you can still have one group of people that you trust to keep the machine on and connected and all of that, that technical part of stuff. But in terms of choosing the UNL, they don't have a say, and some crowd source method determines it.
So and I think this is one of the points that's really overlooked and poorly understood with the UNLs and the UNLs that people use. The UNL is shipped with Ripple because it needs to ship with a UNL to work, because otherwise, you'd spin up a validator and nothing would work, because you would then have to try and work out who to trust to basically reach consensus with, as your validator needs to do. And so it ships with a list, but it says in the instructions, that you should learn to trust other validators and you should create your own list or use another published list. And all a published list is a group of validators that a particular validator trusts, and they create a list and they publish it for others to use. And that list is, I as a validator on those lists have no control as to whether I'm on that list or not. It's entirely up to the validator to use one of those lists or to include me. I could run a list plus my own validator, for example. And I think it's important for people to understand that the lists are there to use if you choose. They're not something you have to use. You can make up your own list, but you need to understand that you need to learn how to trust the validators. First, you've got to find out who's running the validator. Secondly, you need to know the details of the validator to add to your list. And thirdly, you need to know how much you trust them to do something right when something goes wrong, or how quickly they can fix something. Now, the benefit for me and why I choose to use a list on my validator is because I know that the people who establish that list do all the due diligence of knowing who operates it, how quickly they are to fix it, if they don't. And so, currently we've got a number of validators on the current UNLs that aren't what performing up to a standard that I believe is sufficient. So what I do is I go back to the list creator and I say, hey, these people are not performing up to a level that I, as a validator, believe to be satisfactory. So what are you going to do about it? So what they do is they go and look at other validators and they build up a portfolio of information about each of those other validators that they may consider replacing them with, and do their due diligence that way. But I don't want to have to do that due diligence. I'll leave somebody else to do it on my behalf, and they can do the chasing up. All I need to do then is chase up one validator, which is the publisher of the UNL list, if there's a problem for me. So it's something that, if validators want to have a more diverse vote or say, what they need to do is have more diverse lists. So they need to be creating lists. Somebody else needs to be creating a different list that gives opportunity for others to use. You only need 3 or 4 lists to make it more diverse. 3 or 4 different lists.
Any validator can add or subtract from the list.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my understanding, anyhow.
Yeah, they can. So when you run a list, you can run a list. You can run 2 lists. You can run 3 lists on your validator. You can run a list plus other validators. So all it's doing is telling the consensus mechanism that my validator is trusting these people, and these people are in my list of validators that I'm going to reach consensus with. Because each validator reaches consensus with the validators on their UNL. And that's all. It doesn't go beyond your own network. So, if for argument's sake, if Karma's validator is not on my network of UNLs, then I don't discuss my consensus with them. But if I added Karma's validator to my UNL list, then his validator would come into my consensus process. And then if there's sufficient overlap with other validators who's running Karma, then Karma's is considered by a lot more people. So, it comes down to not what my personal preferences are. It's what everybody else's personal preferences are relative to me. Because I'm the person they need to trust for me to be in a UNL group. They need to be needing me to be trusted as opposed to me trusting other people. And that's the part that's not really understood well by people, and needs to be understood. So if you want more diversity, people need to be trusting other validators and not just using the default that comes out.
But if let's say you put me on your UNL, I don't put you on my UNL. You can trust me, but I'm not gonna connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I trust what you say. But when you're reaching consensus on your computer, you don't listen to me. But if you're running the UNL list, then yes, you do. If I'm on that list, and that's the thing. That's what people need to understand, is that it's all about who you reach consensus with on your validator, and your validator is listening to the list or the people on your UNL list. That's all. It doesn't go outside your network, so it only listens. And the fact that we have that super majority currently is because everybody's basically running the same list, so everyone's listening to the same group of validators to reach consensus. But if there is a more diverse range of lists to choose from, then you're going to get a much more diverse range of validators as a supermajority.
Go ahead, Costa, man. Thank you. Raising your hand for a while, but I think Twitter rogued you for a sec.
Yeah, so basically, I wanted to tell Rippleton, thank you so much for adding all this great input that you're adding. But it kind of goes back to why I led in with what is the value of just transparency in itself, right? Because you've explained some great dynamics and what the complexities of them are, right? But I do think that there's a level of benefit to, like, even in your example of just recording the opinions of those other validators that may not be weighted into the actual amendment process, but for the public, right, to be able to see and for those validators to know that that's being recorded still kind of does add an additional level of trust, because I'm sure the UNL members, you know, unless for valid reasons that they could explain, don't want a very public view of like, well, this 35 group of people is voting one way when 75 or 125 other people are voting another way. And why are these 35 kind of influencing the 125? So just being able to record that information and have it to be public, does that transparency add any benefit?
Yeah, but so this is the thing. We talk about transparency, but the XRP ledger is not transparent at all, because it doesn't send out information into an environment that is viewable. So we rely on third party people like XRP Scan, BitHomp, myself, Chris Thompson, or whoever, to actually build information platforms that looks at the information that is stored on the XRP ledger and portray it publicly. So it's not an XRP ledger problem. It's a third party centralized problem of not displaying the data. If you can understand that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's why that we're kind of here, right? Because if there needs to be some development to like build that mechanism that then displays that data, I think all of us, you know, at least myself, I speak personally, I would be very pleased to kind of see it, to see how the broader consensus, even if it's not playing into the weighted actual voting, you know, and that's fine the way it is. It does give us a way to see if there's a, you know, consensus that it's agreeable, or there's some dynamics that may be swayed from one group to another. Like, just for us average holders, I think that information would be beneficial. So I really thank you for adding your input, because I never thought of it that way, and that does kind of work.
Yeah, so that's the important thing, and you know, and that's another why we say the XRP ledger is incredibly decentralized, because there is no central party who controls it. There is no central party who provides information from it directly. You know, people have to build out apps and platforms to gather the information that it stores and holds, and to be able to interact with it. So you know, it's important that what we do as a community on the ledger is to work out what we want to see from the information, because the information that the XRP ledger stores is vast. You know, you can measure just literally anything, but somebody needs to actually build out an app to pull that information and display it. And there are many people who are doing it, and more people are getting more information out and what have you. I just changed my website yesterday to show the amount of deleted accounts that have been deleted by week, and purely because it's a measure that I look at relative to the new accounts being created, how many have been deleted, and it shows that farmers are shutting up shop just from the information I'm gathering, you know, which is good. But yeah, so I'll have a chat to a couple of the big boys in the information area, like BitHomp and XRP Scan, and discuss with them what we can do to pull the data from all the validators, as opposed to just the UNL validators, to determine what the true measure of the vote is regarding amendments.
Are you in touch with FOMO 3XRP?
Yeah. I'm good with FOMO.
He probably would be a pretty good guy.
So FOMO tends to not go so much with regards general information about historical data. He's more into transactional data, which is what the validators don't do. if you can understand. So he's more into building information around exchange volume, ODL volume, and all those sorts of things, and transactional history. Whereas the other guys like XRP Scan and BitHop, they're more into the general information about account worth, and especially XRP Scan. Yeah, he's into his amendments and vote history and what have you, to the nth degree. So I'll have a chat to him, because it shouldn't be too difficult to gather. And if there is a problem, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess, yeah, now that I think about it, after you said that. By the way, if we can get just a couple of more follows on Ledger Scale, if it hasn't not followed us, it'll get us over a hump. And we got to get up there before we can access certain functionality. So if you haven't and you don't mind giving us a follow, that would be great.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, so far this is great discussion, and we're coming up. We got about 15 more minutes of the space, so please, anybody who's in the audience, if you want to come any questions, there's no dumb questions. Anything you were wondering, if you want us to go back and break something down, please feel free to come up. And NY Crypto, thank you for raising your hand, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for hosting the space. Sorry I wasn't able to join and ask this question earlier. And I apologize if this question has been answered or if the answer has already been set. But would it be more beneficial to start a DAO and then, I guess, have the community build out who they can trust to run the validators, so that going forward, you already have a foundation of trust built within the community, instead of already having validators that exist and then trying to form a DAO after? Would it be beneficial to do it vice versa?
You know, I would have said maybe, yeah, before the XRP ledger and the node structure and everything was already built out. So maybe this becomes like a concept that a network takes into itself and tries to build out. I think the only downside to that is it would take a much longer time for it to be decentralized and built out than it even took for the XRP ledger, right? Because it's all about trust and trusting the nodes that you communicate with. But you know, it's definitely a possibility. I think it's a possibility for future networks. I think it's the structure we'll put them with the whole hype word of the DAO, you know, being very popular right now. So I just want to get from myself, right? So I want to take my little bits I feel like that I've taken from this conversation, and so what I've seen is the best possibility of being able to, if everybody liked this idea, to further decentralize the UNL node structures. The best way to do it would actually be the involvement of an Evernote or like a product like that associated and using hooks, to be able to allow the input from the UNL, although it would still be centralized in the sense of one person being the operator and they could still go down, right? So it's still a centralized entity, but having the ability for the amendment votes to be somewhat in an automated process controlled by the DAO.
Well, you know, the way Evernote combines actually like XLS20 NFTs with hooks. So you could issue the NFT, like say governance votes on like, here's who I want on the UNL. And then, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. And then maybe that could help crowdsource the opinion of how the UNL is determined. Like who's, I don't know.
Yeah, I think if I were to take some of the things that I've gotten out of this, I think Ripple 10 has explained some of the complexities that trying to do it in a DAO way is pretty difficult, if not maybe even inefficient in some ways. I'm not even quite clear on that yet, but I appreciate his input. But that's kind of where I'm leaning at this point, even though the idea seems good. But I do think that there's still value if, a community initiated kind of like validator was set up, and you don't have to change anything about the way the XRP Ledger's actual voting system works, but at least that validator is still representing the broader community. And if another UNL member decides, hey, they've been real responsible with whoever's maintaining it, right? They've proven their competence, and they've proven to be responsible, then the other UNL members at their own discretion then say, I would like to add this other DAO to our UNL list, right, at their own discretion. But that one that they would be adding would be more reflective of just the broader community, and they just add it at will if they found value to it. And that's kind of where I'm leaning at this point.
Yeah, I like that. I'm on that same page. Vet, did you just unmute? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go.
I just want to say, it's a really awesome talk of you guys. My question would be maybe it goes also a bit what Kashta was touching on is regarding, because I think like diversification would be like a good term for of the nodes on the list, so to speak. And I mean the thing is, we see this with XLS20. It's just an example here. For example, if you have, let's say, a lot of people who are on that list who are maybe not so, they're not against it, but they're maybe also not so, let's say, excited about it, or it's not a priority for them, and it's okay. This is, everyone is okay. Then maybe some topics have it easier to pass an amendment, and some topics or themes have a harder time to pass an amendment. Granted, of course, everything is all right, and there are no bugs, and obviously everything is running smooth. But yeah, maybe some thoughts about this. I don't know.
The last part again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the last part basically about, we have seen with XS20, for example, as I said, maybe some people are more open to it, and some people are not more open to it, and in general that you have maybe a side where or a situation where certain amendments have an easier time to pass than other amendments, just based maybe off the preference of the nodes on the UNL. Yeah, but this is obviously, granted, everything is all right, and this, like, there is no, because if you put a reason, or if the software is not stable or something, then it's totally fine, right? But just in an environment where everything is running smooth.
Almost do it how like Flair's doing it. Like, there's 3 different levels to the votes, to the voting consensus of importance of how much votes.
Yes.
Be. And I guess, yeah, you're right. Like, say it was a bug, right? Well, if there's a bug, the UNLs don't want to wait for everybody in the DAO structure, I guess, to make a decision to fix the bug, right? They'd have to move quick. And so, yeah, I guess in the sense that it does make sense that would have to be a capability. Should definitely. The one thing, though, is for sure, the further decentralization of anything creates more inefficiencies. It's just I feel like it's just an inherent thing that comes with decentralization, with the human aspect, because, right, we're all opinionated. And so, right, no matter what, as much as it's great to see the further decentralization, I think there's that inherent unfortunate efficiency that comes with it.
Well, you trade
To me,
off.
there's like a marriage between the two that can complement each other when you find that sweet spot between what you can use, what should be decentralized, and what should be centralized in control of a certain thing. Like there's a lot of blockchains out there that kind of show that in a way how a centralized entity can do good for a network. But it's I like this topic because I mean the XRPL is does and that other blockchains can't do. I mean, proof of stake mechanism, you don't really need the whole mechanism to be on the XRPL. Proof of work, you don't need all that. What the XRPL provides is something that those two Like, we don't need that. So what's being built on there is going to be different from how we use it on the XRPL, say like staking, um, NFTs. You know, I mean, hooks is another one that's going to, you know, execute logic without even having a smart contract. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
that will be able to help out a lot. When all these other features come up and is amended, I believe it's going to be easier in a way to realize what we're talking about. But it's not going to be to the point what we're thinking now. You know what I mean? It's going to need some fine tuning, but I like it. I like it.
Well, there's a trade off if you look at things through the complete uh, perspective or whatever, between resilience and efficiency. And there's one guy, he was an economist type, monetary type, Bernard Latier. He died a
Did
few
I get
years.
rugged?
No, I can hear you. But he basically determined that the sweet spot, because you give up you get more resilience. So when you move, like, centralization is super efficient. Decentralized is less efficient. Distributed is even less efficient. But you get more resilience with decentralization versus, and you get more resilience with distributed versus decentralized. And so yeah, the balance is somewhere around 2/3. So you go 2/3 resilience. That's why you have like 2 arms, 2 eyes, 2 legs, yada yada. But you know, you still got some efficiency, because it would be sort of a waste to have, you know, I don't know, 8 legs. Like, what the hell are you gonna do with 8 legs? You don't need them. It's anyway. But I'm gonna wrap the space up here soon, because there's I posted it up top. If anybody's interested, there's an Interledger Protocol Zoom meeting, and if you want to, I think I put the link up top. If you want to join in, you got to go register and whatnot. I don't think that they have closed the registration, but it might be interesting for the folks in here.
Just to, you know, chime in as the last thing here, basically, is what I was wondering is basically how, you know, I personally know for myself, but how do you vote, you know, in the sense of, you know, like the people who are in charge of voting, like, do you vote in the name of the community? Basically, for example, I see something that is really anticipated or needed or wanted by the community, and I see, hey, this brings value, or am I voting something that's only benefits me, you know, personally? And those are, you know, two things that I see maybe a challenge.
Voting to protect the equipment. Like, if you think that this amendment is going to run your equipment into the ground, and then you're not going to, it'll like impact your reliability, maybe no. Maybe that's a no-go.
Yeah, and I just, you know, thank you everyone for coming today. This was a really fun one. I know it was a little high level, a little bit technical. If anybody has any questions, even if you listen to this in the future, shoot me, Karma. I'm pretty sure any of the speakers a message in the space if there's anything you would like to speak about. And you know, further for. Oh, sorry, Rippleton, go ahead.
That's right. Just very quickly, yeah, just on that on the voting process. The previous speaker. Yeah, one of the most important things when you're considering a vote is not what's been amended. It is what's the effect on the network and how the network is going to tolerate it and whether it's well tested. And they are fundamentally the most important things. You know, there's absolutely no point in amending or enabling an amendment if it's going to break the underlying network, because without a network, you're not going to have your amendment.
Do we have time for a fast last question? By the way, thanks so much for the updates, Rippleton. It's been of useful information. But could anyone explain fast the difference between a validator and a node, or is it pretty much the same?
Well, so all validators are nodes, but all nodes are not validators. So validators is just, it basically engages in the consensus process to determine what transactions get included in a ledger and closes the ledger. And that's it. It does everything else.
Very well. You jumped on that. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot, Rippleton.
Yep. Also at the top, by the way, guys, I posted if everybody, anybody who's trying to get a grant from Ripple, they just opened up their Wave 4 information signups. So I posted that up at the top too for anybody who wants to apply for a grant. But guys, I thank everybody for coming. Speakers, especially, I thank you guys for coming up and sharing your knowledge. And hopefully I see everybody tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate everybody joining and participating. If you want to help us continue our efforts, then there's you can donate to the addresses there at the top of the ledgerscale account. And we thank you for joining. And if you want to join the Interledger protocol thing, it should be starting soon.
Yep, joining right now. There's 800 people in it